What happens when the warmth of a golden jubilee turns to frost within palace walls? When a monarch known for grace and stability makes a choice that divides her own bloodline? For half a century, Queen Margrethe II had ruled with unshakable composure, a symbol of continuity in a changing world. But that autumn, behind the ornate gates of Amalienborg Palace, she made a decision that no one, not even her closest family, saw coming. With a single announcement, the Queen of Denmark set off a tremor that rippled through Europe's royal circles and shattered her family's peace. 4 grandchildren were stripped of their royal titles. Tradition gave way to transformation. And at the very heart of the scandal stood one young man, Prince Nikolai, the golden heir, turned reluctant symbol of royal reinvention. What had driven his grandmother to such a ruthless decision? And what does it mean when a prince wakes up one morning to discover that his crown and his identity have been quietly taken away? The decision, communicated through the palace with characteristic Danish efficiency, was presented as a matter of modernization and practicality. The Queen, through her office, explained that the change would allow her grandchildren, Nikolai, Felix, Henrik and Athena, the children of her second son, Prince Joachim, to shape their own lives without the weight of royal obligations. The court framed the move as modernization to let the grandchildren shape their own lives and align with other European royal houses. But within the family, the announcement landed like a thunderbolt on a clear day. Announced on September 28, 2022, and effective January 1, 2023, the change meant Joachim's 4 children would no longer be Prince or Princess of Denmark. They would instead use the titles Count or Countess of Montpessat with the style His or Her Excellency, while retaining their places in the line of succession. Prince Nikolai was 23 years old when he learned that he would no longer be His Highness Prince Nikolai of Denmark. Instead, he would become simply Nikolai, Count of Montpessat, a title that carried historical weight but lacked the prestige and recognition of his princely status. The change was not immediate. It was set to take effect at the start of 2023, giving the family a brief transition period. For a young man who had been raised as a prince, who had understood himself through that identity since childhood, the transformation was disorienting. The timing seemed particularly cruel. Nikolai had carved out a successful career as a model, walking runways for Dior and Burberry, appearing in fashion magazines across Europe and Asia. He had debuted for Burberry in 2018 and opened Kim Jones's first Dior Men show the same year, later appearing in a Dior campaign. His princely status had undoubtedly opened doors, but he had proven himself with professionalism and a striking presence that transcended his title. Now, just as he was establishing himself in an industry that valued both heritage and individual merit, the ground beneath him had shifted. Observers wondered whether his branding or contracts might shift as well, and more painfully, his very sense of self would need recalibration. The public first glimpsed the depth of the family wound through Prince Joachim, Nikolai's father, whose pain and anger could not be contained within palace walls. In interviews that broke with royal protocol and decorum, Joachim revealed that he had been given only 5 days' notice before the announcement, 5 days to prepare his children for a change that would define the rest of their lives. He described his sons as hurt and confused, words that barely masked the fury and betrayal he felt. This was not, he suggested, the gentle modernization the palace described. This was something far more brutal. "We are all very sad," Joachim told the Danish press, his usual composure cracking. "It's never fun to see your children being harmed." The statement hung in the air, an accusation barely veiled. The Queen's decision, in his view, had harmed his children, not helped them, not freed them, harmed them. The Countess Alexandra, Nikolai's mother, and Joachim's ex-wife, was even more direct. She told reporters she was shocked and in sorrow, revealing that her sons were struggling to understand why their grandmother had made such a decision. The picture she painted was of young men grappling with rejection, trying to comprehend why they had been deemed surplus to requirements in the family they had been born into. The fairy tale had turned dark, and the castle that should have been a sanctuary had become the source of their pain. Queen Margrethe's decision must be understood within the broader context of European royal families wrestling with their relevance in the 21st century. Across the continent, monarchies have been streamlining, reducing the number of working royals who receive public funds and official duties. The British royal family, the Swedish royal house, the Dutch monarchy, all have undertaken similar efforts to create a leaner, more defensible royal structure. In an age of democratic accountability and tight public budgets, the logic is clear. Fewer royals mean lower costs, less scandal potential, and a more focused public image. The Danish royal house, under Margrethe's long reign, has maintained remarkable popularity. The Queen herself is a Renaissance figure, an artist, translator, and costume designer whose talents extend far beyond ceremonial duties. She has navigated Denmark through decades of change while preserving the monarchy's dignity and relevance. Her decision regarding her grandchildren's titles appeared to be cut from the same cloth of careful modernization that had characterized her reign. But families are not institutions, and the cold logic of constitutional reform collides painfully with the warm reality of human relationships. For Nikolai, the situation was complicated by the very structure of his family. His father, Prince Joachim, has always occupied the difficult position of the spare in royal parlance. The younger son, whose purpose was historically to provide backup should something happen to the heir. Crown Prince Frederick, Nikolai's uncle, stood as the future of the monarchy, and Frederick's 4 children would constitute the core of the next generation's royal family. In this calculation, Joachim's children became mathematically redundant, further removed from the throne with each passing year. Yet this cold arithmetic ignored the emotional reality. Nikolai and his siblings had grown up attending royal events, photographed on palace balconies, included in family gatherings that were simultaneously private celebrations and public pageants. They had learned to navigate the strange hybrid existence of being both normal and extraordinary, both privileged and scrutinized. And now they were being told that their participation in that existence had been merely temporary, a childhood phase from which they were being graduated without their consent. The public reaction in Denmark was mixed, revealing the complexity of the situation. Some Danes supported the Queen's decision, seeing it as a practical move that would save taxpayer money and allow the younger generation more freedom. Why should the Danish people support princes and princesses who were unlikely ever to perform official royal duties? In this view, Margrethe had made a tough but necessary choice, prioritizing the institution over individual feelings. Others, however, saw the move as unnecessarily harsh. The titles themselves cost nothing. They were words, honorifics, that carried symbolic weight, but no automatic financial burden. The manner of the announcement, the brevity of the notice, and the visible pain of the affected family members all suggested a decision made with insufficient consideration for its human cost. Social media, that great democratic forum for royal watching, buzzed with debate. Had the Queen been coldly pragmatic or simply cold? In the immediate aftermath, attempts at reconciliation seemed to flounder. Both Joachim and his ex-wife indicated that they had tried to discuss the matter with the Queen, but had been met with a firm, closed door. The palace's communications remained official and distant, emphasizing that the decision was final and had been made with the best intentions. There would be no reversal or softening, though the Queen later issued a statement acknowledging her family's hurt while maintaining her decision. For Nikolai, navigating this public family drama while maintaining his own career and dignity required a maturity beyond his years. Unlike his father, he made no dramatic public statements. In the few interviews he gave, he spoke carefully, acknowledging that the situation was sad and confusing, but stopping short of direct criticism of his grandmother. Perhaps he understood that public attacks on the Queen would serve no purpose, or perhaps he was simply more private by nature. Whatever his reasons, his restraint stood in marked contrast to his father's evident anguish. The modeling industry watched with interest. Would Nikolai's value on the runway diminish without his princely title? Or had he already established enough of a reputation that the change in status would prove irrelevant? The answer, as it turned out, was somewhere in between. He continued to work, but the loss of the prince designation undoubtedly altered how he was packaged and promoted. In fashion, where aristocratic pedigree has always been a commodity, the downgrade mattered. The broader implications of the Queen's decision extended beyond one family's pain. The move highlighted the precarious position of minor royals across Europe. those born into royal families but too far from the throne to have clearly defined roles. What obligation does a monarchy have to those who carry royal blood but are not central to the institution's continuation? Is a title simply a gift that can be withdrawn when convenient, or does it represent a contract, an identity that cannot be unilaterally revoked without causing profound harm? These questions have no easy answers, and they reflect the fundamental tension between monarchy as institution and monarchy as family. Institutions must adapt, streamline, and respond to political and economic pressures. Families, however, operate on different principles: loyalty, love, and the unspoken promise that belonging is permanent. Queen Margrethe found herself trying to serve both masters, and in doing so, discovered that pleasing one meant wounding the other. As months passed, the initial shock began to settle into a new reality. Nikolai adjusted to his new title, and life continued in its inexorable way. The palace and Prince Joachim's household maintained a polite distance, communicating when necessary, but without warmth. Family gatherings became occasions for careful choreography, with photographers scrutinizing body language for signs of reconciliation or continued tension. The Queen, for her part, appeared to have no regrets. In the few public comments she made about the situation, she reiterated that the decision had been made out of consideration for her grandchildren's future. She seemed genuinely to believe that she had liberated them, even as they protested that they felt diminished. This disconnect between her intention and their experience lay at the heart of the tragedy. It was possible for everyone involved to be sincere, to believe they were acting with the best motivations, and yet for the outcome to be painful and damaging. The situation also cast a shadow over what should have been a jubilant period for the Danish monarchy. In 2022, Queen Margrethe celebrated 50 years on the throne, a remarkable achievement that made her Europe's longest reigning living monarch after Queen Elizabeth II's death in September of that year. The Jubilee should have been an occasion for uncomplicated celebration, but the family rift provided an uncomfortable counterpoint to the official festivities. Prince Nikolai's story became emblematic of a larger truth about modern monarchy: the tension between personal happiness and institutional necessity, between family feeling and constitutional duty. His experience illustrated that being born royal is both an extraordinary privilege and a peculiar burden. The privilege is obvious: wealth, opportunity, access, and status that would be unimaginable to ordinary citizens. But the burden is real too: the loss of privacy, the constant scrutiny, and the discovery that your position in the family hierarchy determines not just your public role, but your very identity, which can be redefined by others without your consent. In fairy tales, princes live happily ever after, their status secure and their futures bright. In reality, as Nikolai discovered, being a prince is a more conditional and contingent thing than childhood stories suggest. It depends on where you stand in the line of succession, on the calculations of your elders, on the political and economic pressures facing the institution, and on decisions made in palace offices to which you are not invited. The resolution, such as it was, came not through dramatic reconciliation, but through gradual acceptance. The family did not heal in any cinematic sense. There was no tearful reunion, no public embrace signaling that all was forgiven. Instead, they learned to coexist with the wound, to function around it. Nikolai continued his life and career, now as a count rather than a prince. Prince Joachim eventually relocated with his current wife and younger children to the United States, taking up a position with the Danish embassy in Washington, D.C., a move that conveniently provided both geographic and emotional distance from the palace. Queen Margrethe, approaching the winter of her reign, faced the reality that her decision, however strategically sound it might have been from an institutional perspective, had cost her something precious in her relationship with her son and grandchildren. Whether she considered that cost worthwhile, only she could say. But the decision stood, irreversible and defining, a permanent marker in the family's history. For those who watched the drama unfold, the lesson was ambiguous. Had Margrethe been a far-sighted monarch preparing the institution for a sustainable future, or had she been an imperious grandmother who prioritized abstraction over affection? The answer, frustratingly, was probably both. She was a woman in her 80s, trying to secure her legacy and prepare the monarchy for continuation after her death, and she was a grandmother who had hurt her grandchildren in pursuit of that goal. Both things could be true simultaneously, and in their coexistence lay the essential sadness of the situation. Prince Nikolai, for his part, emerged from the controversy with dignity largely intact. He had not chosen the drama, had not sought the attention, and had handled the situation with admirable restraint. In losing his princely title, he had perhaps gained something else, a clearer sense of who he was beyond the accident of his birth. It was not the path he would have chosen, but it was now his to walk. The story of Prince Nikolai and the Danish royal family serves as a reminder that even in the most gilded cages, even among the most privileged of families, human emotions remain raw and real. Titles can be granted and revoked, positions can be redefined, and institutions can be reformed. But the hurt caused by feeling rejected by one's own family, by being told that you are no longer quite necessary, that pain is democratic, recognizing no distinction between prince and pauper. It is simply, achingly human.